Well, welcome everyone to the launch of Entrepreneurship Week 2020. And in these unprecedented times when, of course, we find ourselves using the word unprecedented far too often, it's ever more important to encourage, explore and energise that entrepreneurial mindset. My name is Matt Salir. I'm the director of RMIT's own Activator, and we're the heart of innovation and entrepreneurship here at RMIT University. So thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to respectfully deliver an acknowledgement to country. So today, as we gather from all areas across Australia and beyond, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and the Indigenous nations. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin nations on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of RMIT University today. In this time when our Willem, or our meeting place, is dispersed across so many separate homes, we hope that you all feel a strong sense of Noogle, belonging, in meeting with this like-minded community today. And when we use what are now most common to all of us, these comfortable video conferencing tools we find ourselves using today, I respectfully acknowledge that the lands we're conducting the business on today remain unceded, and respectfully acknowledge the First Nations people, their ancestors, elders past, present and emerging. Thank you. So thank you all too for joining us today. This is our launch of Entrepreneurship Week, and a webinar and a wonderful panel that we've got in store for you, and certainly a range of events through the week that we've curated we think are really top notch. To kick us off, I'd like to take a minute or two to introduce our stellar lineup of panellists that will be following me today. And for each of the panellists, a bit of a trick, a bit of a curveball to start us off with. I'd like each of you to introduce yourselves and put yourselves in the shoes of our hackathon students in the coming days, and take one sentence to explain your purpose, your passion, and what you're here to do. Usha, I might throw to you first.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Usha Iyer-Raniga, and I would also like to pay my respects to the Woiwurrung and the Woiwurrung tribes of the Kulin Nation, on whose lands actually I live as well, and also acknowledge RMIT's support in recognizing Indigenous communities. So to answer Matt's question, well, we've got 3 SDGs in particular that we're interested in today. And the reason I would say these SDGs are important is because particularly SDG 12, which is on consumption and production, touches each and every one of us in what we do on a daily basis. Whether we're living in places, in the built, as part of the built environment, which is my area of expertise, or whether it's food that you eat, and everything that you do has an associated waste. What we're trying to do with circular economy is close that gap. So rather than moving into a system where waste is created, we are trying to move into a system where waste is part of the input into the system itself. So waste, as we understand it now, should not exist and will not exist. And I think I'll leave it there, Matt.
Wonderful, Usha. And we'll hear a bit more from Usha in a moment. Renzo, you're next off the rank.
Thanks for the introduction, Matt. Thanks for the acknowledge of the country. So I'm part of the RMIT team responsible for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals agenda throughout the university. And when we're talking about the university, we're talking about the curriculum, we're talking about research, we're talking about the operations and governance, and we're also talking about something very, very important, which is we call leadership. So whether RMIT is using all the capabilities we have, all the resources we have to drive change, to influence our stakeholders to be more sustainable. And if I can say a little bit that my passion is sustainability and partnerships, and I think we are all together in the same boats. And without partnerships and collaborations and understand that we are all connected, there is no future. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, mate. And next off, Jaison Hoernel from Good Cycles. Jaison.
I figured that out. Sorry. Hi. Hello. I'm Jaison. Thank you, Matt, for your acknowledgement and for having me here. A lot of things come to mind when I think about what's important to me. I think more than anything for me, it's about, I would say I love bikes, but I would say people. I think center to everything is people, and particularly for me, and I think young people, and I think that constant appetite to, I think, make the world better and to make things make things as sustainable as possible.
Wonderful, awesome. Sean Trewick, Circular Economy Victoria. Good to have you here as well, Sean.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, it's very excited to be here. So I'm a director at Circular Economy Victoria, and I think this is a very exciting initiative because we get to play with, these awesome targets we have called the Sustainable Development Goals. We have, another 10 years to really get as far as we can in terms of reaching those goals and targets under them. And then also, play around with systemic tools like the donut from Donut Economics. And I think, all the participants in this hackathon, it's a great opportunity to start to think about how we can design products and services and take advantage of these opportunities to redesign, build back better after COVID with these systemic goals like the SDGs and the donut as our vision and as the kind of endpoint that we aim to. So yeah, just very excited to see what comes out of this.
Wonderful and great to have you. Emma from the City of Melbourne ran a wonderful innovation challenge last week. Great to have you here as well, Emma.
Great, thanks, Matt. So good to be here. And yes, it's a whirlwind of circular at the moment. I'm really loving seeing circular economy pop up in all many ways, shapes and forms on lots of agendas. And yes, we ran the end of our sort of 3-month-long elongated hackathon that we call the Open Innovation Challenge. And this year, the theme was around how we can eliminate waste and move towards a more circular economy. So my role, I work at the City of Melbourne. My official title is sort of Smart City Projects, but I live in the economic development team. So I sort of predominantly look at innovations and looking at how we can foster our innovation community and startups in the City of Melbourne, and with a bit of a smart city lens as well. Something to think about. I think I've become really fascinated with the donut economics model recently, and I think just one thing something for the hackers to think about is how can we move away from that traditional take, make, waste model? How can we really work on the complete opposite of that, and how can we make sure everything that we have, every physical thing and anything we have in this environment has value, and how we continue to allow it to have value. So I look forward to also being involved as a judge on Thursday. So I'll bookend it on Thursday, but thanks for having me once again.
Wonderful. I think that's an open invitation to flattery in the Q&A for Emma to influence the judging on Thursday afternoon. And last but not least, one of the winners of the Open Innovation Challenge on Circular, Amanda Bravo from T1. Amanda, great to have you on the panel as well.
Hi Matt, thanks for having me. So my name is Amanda and I am a Master of Design, Innovation and Technology student at RMIT. And as mentioned, as well as that, I am part of Twine, along with Joseph Yap and Shimroth Thomas. And our vision for that project was to eliminate waste from the wine industry by adding value to winemaking waste. So I think that's, I guess, a key part of our passion, just to show, I guess, other students that in their projects and everything that they do moving forward, they can look at their issues sort of like in a broader, bigger picture. It's not just about the product or the system or the service that you design, but also all the systems that you're going to be impacting with that solution.
Great. It's very dear to my heart, the wine industry. So glad to see that you're focused on the sustainability there as well. So now remember, everybody, on the webinar today, we've got some great time for Q&A through this afternoon. Everyone's welcome to participate. Use the chat function down the bottom and submit your questions and comments in the chat room. And I promise I'll get to, and the panel will get to, as many as we can. So let's get started. As I mentioned at the start of the afternoon, we here at RMIT believe entrepreneurship and innovation are crucial for our society. And today in this climate, that's never ever been more true. At Activator, it's our calling and our purpose to nurture and celebrate that entrepreneurial mindset that I believe is critical and in all its forms. There's something very special about what we do at Activator, and that's capturing that spark that happens when our gifted team that we have here work with those that we partner with to create this powerful combination of creativity, inspiration, knowledge, and these wonderful knowledge support networks like you see in the panel today to create new solutions and bring them to life. It's that catalyzation is an amazing thing to be a part of. And so we understand to be really relevant in the modern world, universities must do this. We must create enterprising, confident and agile graduates like Amanda and indeed Jaison, another one of our graduates, that can flourish in that world, that workplace of the future, that community that we all want to be a part of. And that's why we foster the best minds that we can through our entrepreneurial activities. And this week, the showcases that we have and the hackathon that we're going to be seeing many of you participate in the next few days is just one little glimpse into how much we value that. And so that, you know, really is often shaped around disruptive technology. We heard a lot around the disruptive technologies influencing the circular economy space and how they will be part of it. But really, those technologies were unimaginable a decade ago. And in 10 years' time, there'll be even more that have shifted again. So whilst it may be daunting to some, at Activator, our role and our team's role is really to embrace that ambiguity, that change, both in technology and business models, and make the most of it to create true purpose, to create true value. So more importantly, we're seeing that in our graduates, in our students, that reason, that purpose, that desire for impact is not about the technology. It's about their aspiration to make a difference in the world, as we heard from many of our panelists now. So increasingly, a large amount of our work we're doing within RMIT and colleagues like Usha and Renzo among them are running accredited programs in colleges that shape around purpose-driven innovation challenges, grappling with these really gnarly questions that things like the donor economy model throw up to us. And organisations that we partner with are really keen to explore that as well, leaving their mark in more ways than simply creating economic value. And we know that that's what entrepreneurs do, right? They create means to push the boundaries of innovation, to push on the edges of what we know is possible, and to disrupt entrenched business models, make changes that create not only economic, but social, environmental, cultural, and even political value that's new in our society. So purpose-driven enterprises like a couple that we'll hear about today, focusing on this type of long-term, multifaceted value creation is really what we're talking about when we talk about social impact and social enterprise creation. It's something I'm really proud to be supporting, not only through this hackathon, but through Activator and RMIT's work in an ongoing way. But you can't do that alone. You know, social innovation and entrepreneurship generally are contact sports, and you need to partner, you need to collaborate. And so the partners from the community we're working with, you've heard from a few of them today, City of Melbourne, who are driving some of the most innovative approaches and livable city initiatives, not only here in Australia, but globally recognised for that. Circular Economy Victoria, we heard from Sean, but successfully advocating for really significant changes in public and private enterprise policy throughout Victoria. And then startups and emerging companies like Good Cycles and Twine, you know, two, again, RMIT alumni, awesome work, but driving startups to take that sustainability, to take that circular approach, to push the boundaries of what we know is possible with new technology and new models. And of course, you can't do that without wonderful internal collaborations. And today we're going to hear from our amazing partners at the Social Impact Hub, Social Innovation Hub that we have here at RMIT, researchers like Usha and a team working on those UN SDGs and bringing them to life through these really translatable research projects, action-orientated, and our own sustainability team really focused on enhancing awareness of those SDGs across all of our many staff and students, as well as our alumni. But that's enough from me. Who better to tell you about this work than the Renzo and Usha, who'll take you through a little bit more of those areas around sustainability and the research in the SDGs before we kick off into the panel and the Q&A. So Renzo, I might pass to you and let you tell us a little bit about the work that your team does for RMIT and the impact that's having across the organisation and the broader community.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. It's a great introduction, and I think something that it's pretty much linked to the SDGs is the collaboration and partnership part of the work you mentioned before, and this is, I think, is something new about the SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goals, just a short introduction, is the latest United Nations approach for the sustainable development. The United Nations has been working with sustainable development since 50s. And this is the latest approach. This is the latest agenda. And this agenda is comprised by 17 different goals. And under each one of the goals, there is a set of specific targets and indicators that are actually trying to address the biggest challenge we face as a society. The SDGs goes we have the traditional concept of sustainability, which is basically based on the social, the economic, and the environment pillars, right? And something that's it's new about the SDGs and these new sustainability governance frameworks is about the collaboration and partnerships side of the things. The SDGs recognize that without collaboration and without partnerships, we cannot achieve the goals. Something that is also entrepreneurship is all about the SDGs. The United Nations recognize that it's impossible to achieve the SDGs without thinking outside the box, without going beyond business as usual. So I think the SDGs provide us a sustainability framework where we can see that all actions we have are impacting and being impacted by social, environment, and economic aspects. I think it's also important to reinforce that ourselves, RMIT, we're trying to implement the Sustainable Development Goals agenda throughout the university. So in 2017, we became signatories of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And since 2017, we're actually implementing the SDGs agenda throughout the university. We don't have a lot of time here to talk about all the work we are undertaking here at RMIT, but I think if anyone is interested to know a little bit more about the work RMIT is doing on the SDGs space, please feel free to go to our SDGs website where you can have more information. And I think this event, the E-Week, is not only helping to raise sustainability awareness, it's actually helping us to foster innovation and to influence stakeholders to be more sustainable. Just this is a nutshell what I would like to talk, provide a little bit of a review about the SDGs, how the SDGs can actually help us to think outside the box. And I think during the discussions, we'll be able to provide more details about it. But over to you, Matt.
Great, Renzo. Thank you so much. And it is really amazing. I know it's something that makes me particularly proud to see the efforts that we as an institution go to, and a large institution, but go to in really living those SDGs. And it does ring true, as you say, that entrepreneurship is critical to that. We can't keep doing what we've done the way we've always done it. We just won't get there. So it's wonderful to see the efforts that have been made by you and the team and many others around the university. So we also have a wonderful emerging and growing cluster of academics and researchers working on a range of the SDGs, and we're very fortunate to have Usha here today to tell us a little bit about the work that's happening in that growing cluster and her take on the SDGs we'll be talking about today, as well as through the hackathon 10, 11 and 12, and why they are really critical focal points for her work. So Usha, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Matt. So let me start by, this may be something that you may or may not be aware of, but the Sustainable Development Goals that Renzo talked about, and a little bit of the history that he mentioned, nowhere in any of the targets or indicators of the Sustainable Development Goals is there mention of circular economy. So let me repeat this. There is no mention of circular economy anywhere in the targets or the indicators or the goals themselves of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you might wonder then, how does circular economy then get linked with the Sustainable Development Goals of the SDGs? The two of them are intricately linked, and they're linked because the principles by which circular economy operates and the principles by which the Sustainable Development Goals, the targets and indicators have all been set up are all about resource efficiency and about how to ensure that the resource efficiency that any activity that we undertake associated with resource efficiency does not overshoot the recognition that we need to live within the bounds of our planet. So you may use other indicators such as the ecological footprint indicator, you may want to use carbon measures, you may want to use the Sustainable Development Goals, or you may just want to think about simply from a triple bottom line perspective, from the environment, economic, and the societal perspective. But it's a bit like COVID-19. You know, we are all in this together. If we don't think about our own individual impact, whether that might be the food that we eat, the spaces that we live in, the energy that we use, whether that's in transportation, or what we're doing right now is we're using digital platforms, and there's energy associated with this in the background. So all of this clearly has got black balloons, carbon emissions taking place somewhere, and somebody's paying for this. So I think a good way to think about the whole issue around sustainability and circular economy is to start thinking about the impact that we as individuals have, and never to think of it as this is beyond our control and there's nothing we can do. Because if you all think like that, we're never going to innovate. We're never going to bring in new knowledge, new experiences, and entrepreneurship. Now, specifically looking at SDG, and I'll walk back from SDG 12, SDG 11, and SDG 10. So SDG 12, as I said before at the start, is about consumption and production. And whether we like it or not, we are impacting on it. And I've given examples about food, about built environment, about clothing we wear, about the choices that we make, whether that might be in terms of food or where we live or how much energy we use, or in a weather like today, where it might be 12 or 13 or 14 degrees outside, whether we choose to wear a t-shirt or whether we choose to wear something else that keeps us warmer. So these are all individual choices that we make. And whether we like it or not, we're all in this together as part of SDG 12. What SDG 12 tries to do is start making us think a little bit more about, and this goes not just at an individual community level, but also at a local government level, a national government level, start getting us to think about some of those practices that impact on these decisions. So thinking about procurement, for example, thinking about the waste that's generated in cities, thinking about how much waste is being generated, and how much of that waste gets reused back into the system, which takes us very neatly into SDG 11, which is about sustainable cities and communities. And interestingly, safety, and again, this is a term that you'll see coming up again all the time in a COVID-19 world. So it talks about resilience, it talks about safety. So resilience could be from a mitigation perspective, resilience could be from an adaptation perspective, or resilience, and increasingly now again, the debates are about well-being in a COVID-19 world. So that also is a part of resilience, which impacts on how we live and how we work in cities and suburbia, etc. And then is SDG 10, which is about reduced inequalities within and among countries. And we know that even though Australia is a developed country, we know that there is a big gap between the people that don't have much and the people who have a lot. Now, this may be in the form of, a very wealthy individuals in society. It may be in the form of people who don't have a space to live, or people who are considering other situations that might be affecting them, whether that might be as part of violence, or whether that might be as a part of access to opportunities. So I hope I have given some level of succinctness between the three SDGs, but really it's important, I think, to finish off by saying that SDG 17, which is about collaboration, is perhaps the most important SDG that's underpinning all of the work that's being done, because it is just not possible for one group of individuals, one nation, one city to try and be to achieve all these SDG goals if you're not in this together. I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Usha, that's a tremendous context to finish on as well. I think the complexity of what we're grappling here is a wonderful segue into the panel, and probably the first question I had about how we're doing. Like it's an incredible time, and whilst perhaps flippantly I said at the start, unprecedented is used unprecedentedly at the moment, but it is a lot of things we're trying to grapple with. And I wanted to throw to you, Emma, and when we think about the current climate and all these events of the last 6 or 9 months, how do you think our city's doing? How are we doing in terms of that health and livability and resilience? There were some wonderful positive examples that we saw in the Open Innovation Challenge, but how do you feel we're going? Are we heading in the right direction?
Yeah, Matt, I think I'm positive that we are. I do genuinely think that we are moving in the right direction, although it's hard to stay in a positive mindset when there's so much negativity in the news and in the media. And I think particularly with COVID-19, a lot of people have been swept up in that, and rightly so. It's been an absolutely trying time for so many people. I think from a city perspective and our sort of infrastructure and the way we've been, positioning ourselves in Melbourne is that we've really set ourselves up strong with regards to sustainable goals and around our sort of the ways in which we would like to tackle our waste and our recycling measures. And so we've released a couple of key strategies early on, late last year, and also in line with I know the Victorian government have released a Recycling Victoria policy, which I think was also going to be called a circular economy policy, but it didn't actually, the name didn't quite get up for whatever reason. But there are, and again, this might sound a little bit boring to some, but having these documents, these strategies in place are really key to keeping us accountable and to drive those targets and goals and measures like the UN sustainability sustainable goals. And we've got a climate change mitigation strategy. We've got a waste resource recovery strategy. When we had our restructure last year, we've actually got a branch and a division that's actually called Climate Change Action. It's actually got action in the title. So it's sort of like, just goes to show that there's sort of really a sense of moving forward and really driving some change here. So I think when myself personally, being able to run programs like Open Innovation and drawing out innovations from the community has been incredibly enlightening, and that has really picked me up actually over the last few weeks. So not only the top submissions that sort of you saw at the pitch event, but there were over 124 applications that came through, and these are all passionate individuals or teams or students or people all trying to solve for some of these incredibly hard challenges. So that's been really, really exciting. So City are doing things. I think in my role, I'm able to help and foster and engage with individuals and citizens within the city. So again, coming back to that collaborative piece, I think we've all got a role to play in making sure we are moving forward.
And the waste recycling strategy is a great example, I suppose. And Sean, I'm interested in your take on that sort of little note there that, you know, circular, and Usha mentioned it as well. Circular as a concept is not always as evident as it perhaps ought be in being a mechanism for people to actually intentionally, you know, solve for or act on these really big issues. What's your take on how that language is received? Have you seen these policy levers, which I know you've had a big role in influencing? How are you seeing them playing out for the city as a whole?
Yeah, well, I think at the moment, a lot of the work that we're doing, or at least a lot of our focus is on COVID and our recovery response, and that's been quite significant over the last few months. And something that's been really exciting is, even off the back of this Open Innovation Challenge, it actually allowed us to engage with Sean and the Circular Economy Victoria team, which is actually going to be, we're going to be working together on some really exciting stuff going forward. Because I think, yes, it's all very well and good to have some of these strategies and things, but we also need to be thinking about the tangibles and actually identifying that there are, even though there are certain teams like a waste team or your engineering team or whatever teams you have, there are so many parts of the organization like procurement as well that we've touched on that are actually contributing to that circularity. So I think part of the work we might be able to, you know, I think it's about not working in isolation. So really, I think there's a ways and means by which we can work with, you know, external bodies like Sean and the Circular Economy Victoria, and how we can organise ourselves internally to up that language and that sort of understanding around what circular means, and actually going, hang on, the activities I'm contributing to the city are within that circular realm. So I think there's an educational piece, but I think there's also going to be a realisation that a lot of the work we are doing is contributing to this movement.
And Sean, is that your take on that advocacy role, that policy influence role? Are you seeing that, you know, that sort of top down, bottom up starting to converge to Usha's point about that collaboration being key? How have you found that, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, you know, moving parts on various levels, and I think the thing that you know, that comes out quite clearly is that often those people on those different levels ask the same question and be like, is it my responsibility? Shouldn't government be taking responsibility for our waste crisis or our, you know, our lack of climate action? Or shouldn't the consumer be, you know, buying more responsibly and advocating for zero waste in their household? So I think we all have an active role to play in this overall systemic transition to a more prosperous future. And I guess, what this event is about is really just about finding those solutions. And at Circular Economy Victoria, we advocate on three things, basically. We advocate for the donut to be our vision. And the donut, we mean the donut and the Sustainable Development Goals are very much aligned. So when we talk about the donut, we also talk about meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's our vision, right? That's where we're aiming at. So everything we do, all the solutions that we put forward to problems, whether they're micro problems or like, macro systemic problems, we use that as our guiding, benchmark and vision. And then we use the circular economy as a mechanism to help us get there, because the circular economy is, on one hand, very technical in terms of closing material loops and about how we can use materials and products better within our supply chains. But then on the other hand, it's a very social problem to solve as well. But how do we use, materials and energy in a different way? An example I use is a car. We can design a car to be fully circular on a technical level, where we can, get back all that material and components and reuse them on various levels of the waste hierarchy. But if we put all that energy and time designing that car, when we don't ask the question of what do we need a car for, which is transport, and is there maybe not a better way to move people around from A to B, then we're missing out another part. So that's more of a social question about behavior change and that, which I find really interesting. And then the last level is, this is, so we've got the vision of the donut. The circular economy is a kind of mechanism to get there. But then the actor is really the individual, and individuals are everyone. It's people in the household, your consumer level, people in the commons, your community groups, your footy club, your the people that you interact with, whether it be, whatever recreational activity you take part in. Then you've got the market, which is, traditional industry and your professional persona, how you essentially make money and, how you put out ideas to market. And then the state, how do we be an active citizen, and how do we, if your professional persona is a policy maker, how can you make change as an individual in that position? So that's our agent of change, if you will. So that's how we think about it at Circular Economy Victoria.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good lead into you, Jaison. I mean, you're building an enterprise. You're endeavouring to have that interconnectivity between all those moving parts that Sean and Emma have articulated. How are you finding it? How do you make sure that your business model and the impact that you want to have is continually lining up? What are the decisions you're making, and how do you grapple with that?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I just I came to social enterprise, which is good cycles 4 or 5 years ago, out of when I say from a background of making a lot of money for a lot of other people, and I found what is really interesting is and to Emma's point about that question of the silos of the City of Melbourne, whether it's engineering and transport, for us that's been a really interesting journey in how we can help to sort of tie those together as a social enterprise with a and social enterprise meeting that challenge of, we talk about sustainability and we use the term in terms of our commercial sustainability, but we also obviously as an enterprise are really interested in that environmental sustainability, and then social impact, whether that's for us creating jobs or reducing carbon emissions through using bikes instead of trucks and vans. And it's really interesting. As I said, I think the strategic alignments are starting to happen. Ultimately, the question is, as John sort of said, what happens where the rubber hits the road with the actual, in the free market, and that the question of how we look at that. I think, to the behavior change question, for us particularly, we were part of the recent Hobson's Bay rolling out of the recycling program down there, which which was a fascinating project for us in terms of we were using cargo bikes to do a lot of the work in that project, and meanwhile getting chased around by residents who didn't want to be doing recycling, and that behavior change piece, which I think in that space is really interesting, and I think for us in that question of where behavior is going in transport, and Sean talked, I think, about the fact that there's a better way than a car. I think there's always been better ways than cars, but what does that opportunity look like now? And particularly for us navigating what I think is a really interesting transition from what has been for a period of time talked about as the sharing economy, and what does that now look like as a circular economy? And I think that you know, the question of sharing, and you know, we do a lot of work for car share companies, and we have been involved in bike share for a long period of time, and globally there's a really interesting shift through this, but for us, you know, it's where to navigate that, and what does the future of you know, of that look like? Social enterprise and social entrepreneurship has that exciting ability to potentially create that gap between what policy wants to deliver versus what commercial enterprise want profit. So, you know, in simple terms, trading profit for social good, I think, is a really exciting proposition for what the new challenges are. You know, I think that there's an opening up, and you know, even in the last you know, few months, a real interest in what that could look like, as opposed to just turning to, you know, to innovation in terms of a venture capital funded model, but you know, really strong openings up of social impact bonds, and looking at ways of tying that, and figuring out what that question of the value of social impact really is, which is still largely unanswered at so many levels.
Yeah, I see a note there in the questions about GoGet, and I was fortunate enough to know Bruce when he was setting that up, and to your point about economic models, you know, to meet the market. You know, he had this projection. He knew that it was going to be 3.5 years before he broke even, but he was targeting, you know, apartment developers and city councils to ensure that his model's there. And now you look at GoGet, and that's been really successful at shifting policy and practice, but from a market-driven perspective. And so I think, you know, getting that balance between those two is really important. And Usha, I guess I wanted to throw to you on that one. You know, what is the balance in starting to move the needles on achieving these SDGs between policy setting and the public sector and actual market-driven incentivization in the private sector? How do we navigate that balance? Where should we be putting our efforts? If you know, you're a student listening to this today and you're thinking about the hackathon the next 2 days, where do we focus on advocacy? Do we focus on, you know, new shiny business models, or how do we split our efforts?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a straight answer for this. You know,
no silver bullet yet.
I have to say it depends. I mean, you know, it's all a case of what levers are available and what levers can be pushed to get the maximum outcome for that particular piece of work. I mean, a good example is, for instance, in Europe now, there have been discussions about taxing companies for using virgin materials. Now, imagine if something like that happened in Australia, how quickly things would have to change overnight. Or, you know, I mean, at another level, last night at Q&A, there was a young Liberal candidate from Sydney, a young man who was very confident that the Liberal Party in Australia is going to change its stance on climate change, and was very confident that, you know, that's going to happen overnight. So, you know, policy settings are important. Individual responses, and where do you find these levers to support you know, the stakeholders that you're targeting is important. But I think also it's really important to keep questioning and trying to push the boundaries as much as possible, because we can never ever have a situation where, you know, you see something that's successful in one part of the world and then you just cut and paste that into the Australian context. That's not what sustainability is about. That's not what circular economy is about. So it's really trying to understand your own market, your own stakeholders, and of course, you know, for a business to flourish, it needs to also think about financial sustainability. So I think it might be a few years before getting to the point where you want to go, but I don't think that should stop people from starting now and starting to innovate now.
And speaking of starting, I guess, Amanda, I'm really excited to hear your impressions as a student entrepreneur. You know, you're just starting this journey. You've been grappling with these questions of, you know, product market fit and understanding the customer and where to put your energies. You know, what are some of the reflections, the highlights, the struggles that you've had so far, and, you know, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so it's been a while, right? The past few weeks, but I guess our journey has been pretty good. At the early stages of the design phase, it was really difficult to get communication with stakeholders. And as you've said, or everyone has said, collaboration is really important, especially with new ideas. But now as Twine has progressed, we are seeing more interest from people in the industry, which is amazing. And now in the situation that we're in right now, so being able to network is definitely more difficult with social distancing, but at the same time, I think people are more keen to connect and they have time to chat virtually. So it's been really amazing to see how the industry is so receptive to student innovations. And I think that's really encouraging, not just for myself and my team, but for all the students thinking about this. There is support out there. Apart from that, my journey as an MDiT student and my team members who are also MDiT students at RMIT, it's been great, and it's given us a lot of confidence to see that all the issues that we're facing can be tackled through collaboration and through working in multidisciplinary teams, and that's what MDiT is all about. And I think it's definitely something that's going to be key to getting us out of all these issues that we're in.
Yeah, no, and I think that the blend of business, technology, design, all coming together is really crucial as well when you're talking about, you know, BHAGs as we are. Some great questions coming through. I wanted to quickly pivot to a couple of those. And Renzo, I'm going to put you on the spot here because there's a great one around metrics. And, you know, we've talked about impact measures and donut, the donut economic models. But what are the question here is, what are the significant metrics businesses should be looking to understand where they can make the most sustainable differences? What should we measure to understand whether we are or aren't progressing where we thought? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very interesting question, because I'll just get a little bit deeper in that question. Nowadays, what's happening with the SDGs? SDGs is kind of fashion, right? Everybody wants to talk about the SDGs. Everybody wants to link their projects or ideas with the SDGs. But if you go to the SDGs, there are 17 goals. If you just look at the goals level, you can absolutely link anything with SDG. But if you go to the targets and indicators level, you can have a better understanding about the problems the United Nations is trying to address. What are the big issues we are trying to address? So any organization, I think, if they want to start measuring properly their contribution to the SDGs, first they have to understand what they are material topics for them in relation to the SDGs. What are the risks and opportunities out of their business? You have a specific organization working in that specific sector where SDG 7 might be something important, but the SDG 12 is not the one that is the major issue. So the first issue, I think organizations, they should understand what's the relationship between their business and the SDGs. And I think there are the two components. The first one is the work you have, the impact you have. And the second one, which I truly believe is the more important one, is what can I do in a different way to maximize my impacts, to have a collaboration or partnership with someone else, to have a better outcomes. And when we're talking about impact, it's not easy. It's not something, let's start measuring our impact and next week we have a good measurement process in place. I think it's a process that will evolve as we go, but we have to have a starting point. And my final thoughts on this measuring impact thing, I think the key word is accountability and transparency. If you are accountable and transparent about what we're actually doing, I think that's a good start.
Mm.
Rather than try to embrace everything and
yeah, and I guess Jaison, for someone who's been in business for a while and you've got a board there. What are some of the things that you are looking to make sure they're aware of around impact that you're having in your business? What are you measuring? What are you really making sure you're keeping track of?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so as our mission is to create employment pathways for youth coming from, backgrounds of disadvantage or at risk in direct employment. And so, our model is based on actually doing that in commercial ways. So, you know, that the balance for us is commercial opportunities versus social impact, and doing that sustainable. So, you know, the big questions for us always come back to, well, how do we do that? So how do we meet that balance, and how do we also measure that balance? So, you know, we've been around. We've really only been around since 2013, and that's seems like a long time, but I think it's probably, you know, we talk about outcomes really when we're very clear, you know, at a strategic level, that we as an organization are at a point where I think we can talk about outcomes. So in terms of being able to say that we've created, you know, 1,000 hours worth of employment opportunities, you know, entry-level employment opportunities for young people who otherwise wouldn't get that opportunity, or, you know, 20 young people have been employed out in the open labor market after coming with us, or we've reduced, you know, we've provided, you know, by using cargo bikes to do what we do, we've removed, you know, 5,000 hours of vehicle traffic from the Melbourne CBD, and then translating that to CO2. So making sure that we're, you know, at a strategic level, really clear about what the outcomes are. And I think because impact, the question for us has always been that impact means a lot of different things to a lot of different parties. And you know, for us as a player in this space, saying, you know, Good Cycles is creating this incredible impact. And, you know, for us, you know, we look at youth unemployment, and you know, post-COVID, it will be over 20% nationally, which is just an incredibly sort of confronting number. So for us, you know, to say that we're tackling that, you know, our impact piece is this, is I think we want to always make sure that we're really clear about how we frame that up, but being able to be able to talk about outcome, and aligning with, you know, the sort of aligning on what those look like for, you know, the strategic piece of that, whether it's local government or state government or the intermediaries who are playing in that space, so that they can use that data and we can help to inform that. So it becomes a two-way conversation, because, you know, what happens particularly, you know, in social enterprise and in this space is a lot of times, you know, and coming from a business background, a lot of social entrepreneurs are so focused on the outcome that they want and the impact piece, they forget that ultimately you really want to be really clear about what that model looks like, and focusing on the outcomes. And, you know, as I said, you know, we've spent a number of years building what we hope is a really strong model, and there's the quantitative and there's the qualitative pieces of that. You know, there's the young people that we work with who, you know, they gain all these incredible, you know, opportunities, but they also just gain these life skills. It's you can't necessarily want to be or able to count that, and when, you know, even no matter how big you are, you have to make a call about what's important to count and what isn't.
Always a balance of the qual and the quant there. There's a couple of questions there, and from Emma and Abby. So I might throw to you on this one, Emma, because these sort of align, and they're about the role of regulation to create change in behaviour. So you know, questions around, you know, what do you think the role of government regulation should be to ensure that a small business or even a large enterprise or another public sector organisation should align their you know, operations to the SDGs, and particularly, and one of these again from one of these questions was around marginalised communities. You know, should we be regulating, or should we let the market take care? What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a fine line, and I think it's quite different sort of working in local government compared to your state and federal. So obviously there are three levels of government that when we talk about regulation, and certain things that only the local council or your local government can really leverage. I think something that the City of Melbourne is trying to do increasingly more and more is actually have a bit more transparency around our own data collection, and allowing there to be, allowing the ability for other businesses or people in the community to have access to that data or information, so that that can help inform their own decision making or help inform new innovation or new ideas. So I think we're trying to be more and more open, I guess, and that's hence we're calling it the Open Innovation Competition. And we do have an open data platform too, which has got over 300 odd data sets on it that we sort of say, hey, here, this is for the community to use, and they go through, it's a really stringent process around what data is private, what shouldn't be. And there's a lot of talk at the moment around like the role of local government or governments and artificial intelligence, and if we're going down that sort of smart cities sort of you know, anonymity, sort of, you know, what's private, what's public. So that's a really interesting dialogue to have. But I think, yeah, I think we need to be seen to be doing the right thing, and being more of a role model as well for other businesses and other organizations to follow suit. So if we are seen to be doing things in a more sustainable, more open, more collaborative way, I think that's going to go a long way in how we can work with others, and how people can see that they can operate. And I think more public-private partnerships, they don't have to, they can be really positive, really encouraging, exciting things. How can we work with our big companies and employers in the City of Melbourne, and how can we help or create programs or encourage those from maybe underrepresented backgrounds to be more involved or to be part of the solution? And I think there's plenty more we can be doing, but I think City of Melbourne are trying to really lead the way in that respect. And we're very lucky because we are a sort of a capital city as well. So we have a lot going for us, but we also need to take our sort of neighbouring councils and our neighbouring local government authorities along with us. We have sort of really close relationships with those inner Melbourne metropolitan councils, like your Yarra and your Stonington and your Maribyrnong and Port Phillip. But I think more and more, and I think you'd probably agree around this whole COVID remote working piece, more and more these boundaries are becoming blurred, like these physical boundaries. And we do have quite physical boundaries as at the City of Melbourne, but I think we need to be thinking outside of those boundaries more and more, which we are. So the Open Innovation Competition, for example, that was open to any solutions globally. We had folks from the US, the Netherlands was one of our finalists, Jakarta in Indonesia. I think there are certain things that we're moving and we're progressing on to have that more holistic, some collaborative view. Yeah.
And Sean, would you share that? Do you think regulation's necessary, or do you think that collaboration will see the day? Yeah, are we on the track that is taking us where we need to be?
100%. I think regulation is maybe lagging a bit in Australia. However, you are seeing a lot of market incentivization, which I think is a good thing for a hackathon. It means there's a lot of opportunity. As soon as government starts to spend a lot of money in a specific industry, now being the waste sector, you see private investment follow shortly soon. And then you would be starting, that would be your venture capitalists and your small investors. And then once that market grows, then you'll see your big institutional investors come on board, and then really, you catalyze big change. And I think one thing I do want to leave, people that are taking part in this hackathon with is that, market only works if there's demand. And at the moment, the government's spending a lot of money on recycling infrastructure that's going to create a lot of supply for recycled content with no home for it. So that's a great opportunity to start a business in that environment where you have this need for demand that government's actively incentivizing. So without losing the systemic focus of addressing inequality on a social level and also keeping within planetary boundaries on a pure business level, that's really a great foundation to really hack away at, but don't lose out of that objective.
Yeah, like for that early stage stuff, that's for sure. There's another question here though that I'm interested in. Perhaps Usha, you could weigh in as well on this. This is really tough economically for a lot of small to medium enterprises though. Yeah, how do you make a decision when sustainable practices often cost you more, so it's cheaper to do plastic than reusable cloth covers and so on. So what are some of the things that you see as important for small to medium businesses to grapple with when they're making those decisions, and how might we start to think of some better solutions there?
Yeah, it's a great question really, Matt, because if you look back to the history of the environmental movement, and I'll draw examples here from, particularly from buildings and construction. When the green building movement started in Australia, every new green building that was built, and this is going back to early 2000, cost at least 10 or 15% more over its counterparts. So there was a business unusual type of buildings, and then there was a green building. And the initial companies, and City of Melbourne was one of the leaders at the time in designing and building their Council House 2 building, which won a number of awards. But the important point to note here, I think, is that whoever starts off, whoever's leading, is always going to, there's something in return that they have to compromise on. And in this instance, the City of Melbourne decided quite clearly and quite strongly that they wanted a building which is a green building, and they were prepared to pay more for that green building. And clearly also over a period of time, as research was further undertaken within these buildings, it became pretty clear that not only is a building green from the perspective of energy use and water use, so on, but the people working in these buildings are also happier. So you have better well-being, you have happier staff, and therefore they are more productive, and therefore the results follow. So the initial investment that was made into green building returned manyfold later on down the track. But of course, this is not going to be an immediate return. This is going to be over a period of time. And you see this in other things as well. You know, if you're buying organic food, you pay more for organic food, but you're giving your body better nutrient value. So these are decisions I think that people have to make in terms of what their immediate needs are, and you can't regulate something like this. But having said that, I think it's important, and going back to some of the points that was made by Sean and Emma, I think it's important for governments to support this movement so that we're not being pulled and pushed in different directions, and we're all going towards the same direction, towards our goal. So if we are looking to support from government, it would be helpful if the government comes up with policies and programs that are supportive of mitigation or supportive of resilience. And at an individual level, you know, it'll help businesses to know that they're working in environments where things are steady and things are not changing as quickly. But on the other hand, we are in a situation where nobody has ever you know, come across the current situation that we are in, and it gives an opportunity to find out what these levers are within your own networks and within your own neighborhoods, and try and use some of these positive and optimistic value adds, and not just think in the short term, but think also in the medium to long term.
I think it's a great segue, and I've been really watching with interest Mike Cannon-Brooks's commentary on the sustainable building that they're planning to build in the context of COVID. You know, he's still pushing ahead with a very expensive, very green, very sustainable building when disruption, physical distancing, you know, work from home connectivity is now the norm. So I wonder, Renzo, if you've given this some thought, you know, what does, if we pivot our minds to the last 6 to 9 months and the pandemic and COVID, what we've proved is possible, what are the impacts on sustainability and connectivity, the use of public transport, the use of public buildings? How do you see some of the trends playing out? Do you think things have changed forever? What's the impact there?
I think definitely we're not going back to the way we were before. I think that's for sure. You know, working from home, remote working, I think something that will just increase as we go. In relation to the impacts, I think as almost everything, there are positive and negatives, right? So as Usha mentioned before, we're using more technology. But if you go from the minerals perspective, for example, we need minerals to our computers, to our connections, to our network system. So we're still using natural resource. Energy, when we are in working office, is much more energy efficient than using the energy in your building. So those are some of the negative impacts, I might say. There are some positives as well, you know, like biodiversity, pollution, transports. There are a lot of aspects that are, you know, definitely make us see, well, yeah, it's getting better. But I think the lesson for us on the sustainability space with the whole COVID situation is when we have to go, actually, we're trying to get back on track. There is an opportunity to get a shortcut and do things in a better way. We're talking about renewable energy. So if this is exactly the future, if we have to do investment or you have to provide support for this specific, that's the right way to go. Yeah, I think the COVID is bringing us to think in a different way, and something else as well. The COVID situation demonstrates how vulnerable we are and how connected we are. And bring it to the SDGs framework this is all about connection. We are impacting and we are affecting by everybody else, and the same way we are impacting and affecting our stakeholders, for example.
And Emma, I wonder if those discussions have happened in the City of Melbourne as well around public facility use and public transport, and that balancing of sustainability and connectivity. How's the city viewing the agenda it's pushing around sustainability and the impact of some of the last 6 or 9 months and the effects of the pandemic?
Yeah, it's hard because we were a city pre-COVID that saw nearly 1 million people travel in and around the city every day. Every day, 1 million people. So that people were using our trams, they were walking, they were cycling, they were doing whatever it was to get from A to B, whether that was to work, to get food, shop, and spend, really. And that's gone. So our pedestrian counters that we've got certain sensors around the city looking at pedestrians, and it's down 90%. Still, and it's been like that for weeks. So it's very concerning, this notion that people are, distributed and spread out and not coming into this hub. But I think it's changed. I think we're looking at a completely new future for cities, and how do we then drive and Melbourne is the economic engine of Victoria. So how do you then bring back people and in a safe in a sanitized way, and then looking again at those transport pieces. We've been able to fast track some really great projects around cycle lanes. Now that there's been less people walking around and less cars, we've got all these cycle lanes popping up. We can build some stuff, and that's great because we can forge ahead on these capital projects. And then the metro tunnel is still going ahead, and that's actually has to keep going. But then how many people are going to be catching the train in the future? So I think there's just a lot of dialogue currently around that. And of course, it's great that people can work from home, but that stops cars coming into the city and the pollution from cars. But then at the same time, people are not safe. They don't feel safe to travel on public transport anymore. So people, if they need to come to the city, are they going to rely on cars? So I think yes, there's a lot of dialogue, and there's a lot of chat around what do we pivot? Do we change what is the city going to be? What's going to be the thing that brings people back here? And I still think there's going to be a place for serendipitous connection, and that's what I love about co-working spaces and spaces that universities house with commons areas, and the social innovation hub, for example. Like I love that. I think there's always going to be a need and an appetite for that. It's very hard to network through a screen right now. So sorry if I've gone around about your question, Matt. Hopefully I've sort of touched on it a little bit, but I think yes, there's going to be some positive environmental things that come out of less people coming into the city, but then what about our economy as well? It's a really challenge.
Yeah, and I guess, if we look at SDG 10 around reducing inequality, Jaison, the pandemic has really, in many ways, not only in Melbourne, but globally, resurfaced and made more acute inequalities, particularly in cities. And, that's social housing to unemployment and so on. What do you think we can do better in this current reality we have around that reducing inequality? What are some of the things that you're seeing as having we should be really leaning into?
Yeah, so this is where I'll jump on a soapbox for a minute here. I think the challenge with all that is and we talk across a number of areas of government and state and local governments, and I think what I've really noticed is that local governments are being really proactive about how they're looking at this. But I will say that in Australia, particularly, we have what are generally reactive state governments and federal governments, and that's becoming really apparent. And I think this is where there are some really significant resets. And whilst yes, this question of public-private partnership and how that gets framed up, I think there's going to have to. I actually think that this is the opportunity to take some really pivotal steps in that position, because that needs to accelerate ahead of the curve. I say this. I've had this conversation with a number of, we have a really great support from philanthropy who've gone through a period of time, and philanthropy in Australia by global standards is per capita is actually quite high, and there's a really strong appetite there. They're coming through crisis. They're now looking at they've done their crisis funding, and they're starting to say, well, what's the next part of this? Because the challenge, in the conversations with philanthropy and others is that at the end of this, or as we start to emerge, and this is now, we're in Victoria, which is extended, we're kind of bearing the brunt of this. And I think, the government's seeing that this is a longer this isn't just switch back on. What does that mean? What that kind of means is that the government's, where is government going to look to find what it does next? And it's going to look back to business, and that's that position that, you know, that big business holds and that corporate holds in Australia is really strong, and it will be a big part of the driver of that. But unfortunately, there is still, you know, not alluding to too much, but, you know, when the federal financial talks about, you know, Thatcher and Reaganism, that's a pretty scary proposition, you know, and I don't want to get, this isn't a political piece, but I think it's really important that you know, that question of where we want to take this, because the definition of disadvantage and has changed. Like that definition of at risk of being disengaged is really shifted. And, you know, there is a whole part of the economy and people who've never experienced what they're experiencing now, which is unemployment, you know, to the level that we've had. So I think it's going to have to come from all sides. You know, we talking really strongly about, you know, and to this hackathon is, you know, it's really important that a lot of that policy is coming through with particularly the young people that are going to be living that, you know, the young people that are actually going to have to work to that. So I think, you know, if anything, the representation question is actually about age. It's not, that's probably the most critical piece of representation, which I think, you know, you want to be addressing in the next, you know, certainly in the next couple of years.
So the generational piece, I think the other one, and Sean, I'm interested in your take on this, is, you know, regional versus metropolitan. You know, how do we ensure that sort of the ability to equitably address some of these issues isn't sort of restrained by where you happen to live? You know, have you done some work on this in Circular Economy Victoria? What's your take there?
On a global level in circular economy communities, there's a lot of focus on cities, just in terms of percentage population of people living in urban areas is increasing. So obviously that's drawing energy there to solve those problems. But then it leaves regions in the sense of people are leaving regions, economies are becoming more fragile, etc. So we've worked with the Geelong region in terms of circular economy. They've put together a group called RICE, which is Regional Innovation for Circular Economy, which is looking specifically at this idea of how do we incentivize innovation on a regional context in Australia, using circular economy as that kind of innovation tool. And I know the Hunter region in New South Wales have also taken this as one of their key projects through the Hunter Joint Organisation. So there is a lot of activity, but again, you don't have the market size, so you really got to talk about different industries. And what's nice about regional context is that you can be more inclusive because the community bond's a lot stronger. So in order to build resilience, it is a lot easier. And I mean, in terms of agriculture, it's extremely important in Australia for us to look after that sector, especially in the context of climate change.
For sure, and I suppose that certainly those regional clusters, that cluster model has been quite tried and proven in terms of moving the needle on some of those innovation initiatives. Have you seen any that you've sort of looked at here, or indeed globally, that you've gone, that's really interesting? I'd love to see us, you know, give that a nudge here in Australia. Perhaps some ideas for some research for some of the students thinking about the hackathon in the next couple of days.
Yeah, definitely. I think regional, my experience, you know, working now with Aspire in terms of building ecosystems around the country, circular ecosystems to take advantage of industrial symbiosis, whereby one organization's waste is another one's resource. We're seeing regional clusters a lot easier to work with. People are a lot more, you know, comfortable with the idea of collaborating in a very open basis, where in the metropolitan, I think we're spoiled for choice in a way.
Sure.
But I think the approach, and that'll be an interesting research piece, an interesting thing to dive into on a business model level as well, is, you know, can more advanced circular business models be implemented in regional context because of that higher collaboration level? And how do you measure that? And how can you, you know, again, share resources between regional and urban contexts? And those resources, not just financial, but also, you know, labor and ideas, etc.
Yeah, yeah. Amanda, I guess I wanted to just touch on SDG 12 and your work around reuse and what have you, reducing consumption and reuse. I've been really frustrated over these last little while about not being able to use my keep cup. I find that's a really practical thing that I can do to reduce single use. And you're obviously addressing that with Twine. Where do you think are some ways that we can improve that responsible consumption and production now and moving forward? What are some of the things that you're seeing, initiatives that are working?
I guess consumption and production are intertwined. It's all about demand. So it's up to, I guess, both businesses and individuals need to be conscious about the choices they make. Now, how we can do that, especially as individuals, I guess it's as simple as just the choices you make. If you live in a share house, be organized and kind of avoid transport, as in car travel, carpool with people after lockdown, of course. Shop locally, and I think that's something that's I've noticed with the situation. Just the increased connectivity, the stronger communities, and sort of people are more willing to shop locally. So I think that's really important, especially if we want to reactivate our communities. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one because I was having this discussion with a friend. It's like, you don't want to be unsustainable. You want to use your keep cup. You want to avoid all these plastics, but at the same time, you want to support your businesses. So buying from them is beneficial, especially during these times. Yeah, it's a tough one. And as any initiatives that I've seen, I guess going back to Twine, Rewind in Melbourne is a good one. They are in Brunswick and they do wine refills in recycled glass bottles, and they also do oil refills and things like that. So looking for those types of businesses that support those things.
And Usha, what, in terms of when you think about SMEs and larger businesses, what are some of the really practical things you've seen be explored or be successful in reducing that consumption of single-use materials? Have you got some good examples internationally?
Yeah, what comes to my mind, Matt, is this building that I visited actually when I attended the World Circular Economy Forum last year in the Netherlands. We had a side meeting with the UN, and this building was absolutely fantastic. First and foremost, it was actually designed initially, the idea was conceived for a bank, but then the bank decided that they wouldn't use this building for themselves, so they decided to lease the building. And the building became a hub for social gatherings. You could hold exhibitions there. So the space was a very, very flexible building space. The restaurant that was a part of the building, they got food that would otherwise be thrown away. So the food was still in good condition. So your zucchinis and your different vegetables and fruits were in good condition, but they were not perfect. So you didn't have a perfect, the zucchini, for instance, might have been slightly bruised, or the apple might not have been perfectly round, or whatever. And so the challenge for the restaurant chefs was, how would you create a menu where you're not quite sure what you're going to be getting for the next day? So that was very interesting. They, of course, had their own water on site. The building was highly energy efficient, etc. But what I really liked was their coffee cups were recycled to paper napkins, and the paper napkins were actually used. So these were the coffee cups were made out of cardboard, a specific type of cardboard. So I think this is really, really important lesson, that you need to know, if you want to reuse something, you really need to know what material is going to making it, so that when it gets reused, or when it gets repurposed, then it's very clear to the next set of people that use it to know exactly what goes on. So transparency is very important. So these coffee cups were reused, and they got created into napkins that were used in the restaurant. And the napkins that were used in the restaurant were then collected and got converted into toilet paper. So here's a really good example of how You know, not just the fact that the building was highly energy efficient, using renewable sources of energy, water, etc., but even the practices inside the building supported sustainability and circular economy. So I think that, you know, these sort of and of course they didn't get there in one day. It took them a period of time to get to where they wanted to go. But the important thing was the leadership that the whole team showed in wanting to push the boundaries as much as possible. So I think, you know, I hope this is an optimistic way of approaching the problem, and also thinking about the local supply chains. I mean, you know, Emma talked about it and Sean talked about it as well. I think it's become pretty clear to us in a COVID-19 situation that some of our global supply chains have really, you know, put a spanner in the works, so to speak. And so it gives an opportunity to start looking at what might be some of those local responses that we can try and cultivate.
Yeah, no, that's great. And there are a couple of questions in the chat there about some of the technical elements of being able to recycle different types of PET plastics and so on and so forth. So there are, you know, improvements in technology all the time addressing that, but there are still some limitations. So look, I don't want to draw to a close the conversation just yet, but I do want to quickly remind us that we do have our wonderful social innovation hackathon over the next 2 days, focusing on those 3 SDGs, 10, 11 and 12 that we've just been talking about a little bit now. And to get us all in the mood, I just want to quickly throw to Dylan in my team, one of our hackathon ringmaster extraordinaires, to give a bit of a quick overview about what to expect, and also and remembering that we would encourage you all to put some questions in the chat room, and we'll get to those as well. But Dylan, over to you to give us a bit of a sense of what we can expect over the next few days.
Nice. Thank you, Matt. Can you hear me okay?
All good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hello everyone. So my name is Dylan. I'll be the facilitator for the hackathon over the next couple of days. I guess I just want to first just pause for a second and acknowledge just how incredible it is that we're all here, and the talk that we've just had, it's really inspired me. And we're all here just to make like the world a better place, and for us and for future generations. And that's kind of the inspiration I think that's going to be great going into this hackathon. As Sean mentioned, there's so much opportunity here. You know, some of these spaces with the government grants and with people who are really getting behind this initiative now, there's so much chance to really dig in and to find and to hack new ways of doing things. So for the hackathon, at a really high level, over the next couple of days, we're going to be going through a design thinking process where you'll meet with your group. We'll put you into teams where you'll get to select which part of the SDGs you'd like to work on. And then we'll take you through like an ideation brainstorming session. You get to test that idea out and create a concept. You get to prototype that idea. And you get to take something that is just an idea into something that's quite tangible for you to pitch in front of a panel. And what's really important is that you do not need to know anything about hackathons. Okay, if this is the first hackathon, completely fine. All right, we're going to take you from the beginning all the way to the end. And you also don't need to be, if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, there are some really intelligent people in the room who know a lot about circular economy, I'm also thinking the same thing, okay? Luckily, we have some really incredible coaches with us over the 2 days who are going to be there to bounce ideas off and to give their guidance and their insights into what it is for circular economy. And also everyone's idea is going to be completely valid, completely valid. Just show up with this inspiration and with the desire to make the world a better place. And then we will guide you from there. I think we're going to put also, there's a link if I'm not mistaken. So there's something for you to click on if you haven't already signed up, or if you haven't done the Typeform link, then if you can continue to do that, that'd be great. And I think that might be all from me, Matt, for the hackathon. I'm just really excited to see what ideas come up.
Awesome, mate. No, thank you so much. And again, thank you to the panel who will be some of those judges over the next couple of days. And we're really looking forward to seeing seeing what's possible. Now, to finish off, I guess I just wanted to very quickly, before we close off, and I'm conscious of making sure we finish on time for everybody, I just wanted to throw to Jaison and Amanda, our student and most recent RMIT alum, just some words of advice for those students. It looks like we've got about 60 or 70 coming through a hackathon, as you heard from Dylan, about exploring new things and testing the limits of your ideas. Jaison, what would you encourage our students and those in the hackathon to be really pushing themselves to do?
I think really focusing on just how far you want to go with it. I think really focusing on what really is passionate for you. I think that's the real key to it. So if there's something that you're passionate about, and it doesn't matter how crazy it is. I just finished reading a book called The Innovation Stack, which is an incredible discussion around that find the problem that you want to solve that means something to you, and then just go for it.
Yeah, I say that to my kids all the time. What problem do you want to solve, not what job do you want to get. If you find a problem you want to solve and you do that for your life, then you'll never be bored and you'll never be unhappy. Amanda, how about you? You found your way to this entrepreneurship thing from an amazing background. What would your advice be to those aspiring entrepreneurs and hackers in our midst?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Do something that you're passionate about, something that you see and there needs to be a solution for this. But for this challenge specifically, like Dylan said, you don't need to be an expert. Like myself and my team, we weren't experts about wine and wine production and all these things. We just knew that we wanted to focus on this because we knew there's a big issue behind it. And we just went from there. And your mentors are going to be a huge part of that as well. So just give it a go and have fun, and just make sure it's something that you're passionate about.
And Renzo, we're a big place, RMIT University. There's plenty of challenges that we're addressing. What are some of the areas you could nudge some of our hackers towards? What would you like to see some new solutions perhaps coming down the line for you for?
I think in each direction we look at from the sustainability point of view, I think there are opportunities for us to improve. I think my recommendation would be try to understand that everything is connected, and understanding this dynamic is actually crucial for innovation. So as Jaison said, something that you're passionate about, try to think as an integrated approach for that specific problem you try to address, incorporating governance, incorporates environment, incorporates social and the economic components. And I think this is the way to go. And something that I think there is always an opportunity and a risk, right? If we're talking about, for example, the SDGs, we are talking about the specific goals that we want to achieve in 2030. So imagine that scenario in 2030, we want to achieve that specific goal. What that represents for us as an opportunity, a business opportunity that we can further develop, or a risk that organizations might need to start measuring better.
Awesome, mate. And really quickly, finally, Sean and Usha, if we look back on today in 5 years' time and we had an international best practice that came out of our hackathon, what are some of the things that you think are really emergent areas that our students might want to think about focusing on? Usha?
Oh, wow. I don't know. The sky's the limit.
Get out there, eh?
Yeah, just go for it. I think as Jaison said, I mean, there's no such thing as a crazy idea till you're absolutely convinced yourself and your teammates that it's not going to gel. Just go for it, I would say. Sean,
same from you. What do you reckon?
Yeah, 100%. I think looking back, I would have liked to have seen some low-hanging fruits. Some of the obvious small niche innovations that can really help just get the ball rolling and get you into that entrepreneurial space, and then start to tackle the bigger questions. But what I would really like to see is, like right from the get-go, startups in Australia or Melbourne really embrace the SDGs and really just drive it home in the next 10 years.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you all to my panelists. Join me in a virtual round of applause. Jason, Renzo, Amanda, Emma, Sean, and Usha. Wonderful to have you here. For those students tuning in today, don't forget those little nuggets and those more like pearls of wisdom that you just heard from our panel as you embark on the Social Impact Hackathon over the next few days. And remember, be brave and bold, test and retest your assumptions. Ask for feedback, ask for help, ask for resources. What's the worst that can happen? And don't let the scale of those problems that we're talking about diminish your desire to have that impact in the world. These are the times where you really want to push, and we've got this wonderful experience in store for you over the next few days. So thanks for coming along today. Thanks for supporting RMIT Activator and our e-week celebrations. Thank you finally to my tremendous panel. I really appreciate it. Don't forget, Activator's got a whole bunch of events that are over the next week and moving forwards. If you want to change a pace, next week we have one on cyber security and as part of the Innovation Festival for Victoria. So please don't hesitate to like us on your socials and join us next time. Thanks very much for coming today, and have a good afternoon. Bye now.